Evelyn Carter saw his name before she saw his face. It was glowing on the gold-framed digital board outside the ballroom. Daniel Hayes and Victoria Langford for a moment. The whole hotel seemed to go quiet. The sound of glass carts rolling across the marble floor faded. The soft voices of the florists disappeared. Even the low hum of the air conditioning felt far away. Evelyn stood there with a white cleaning cloth in one hand and a tray of crystal glasses beside her. Daniel Hayes. She read the name again. Once, then again, as if the letters might change if she stared long enough, but they did not. Her fingers tightened around the cloth until her knuckles turned pale. Evelyn, she blinked. Marisol, the banquet supervisor, stood a few feet away, holding a clipboard against her chest. You okay? Evelyn forced herself to breathe. Yes, she said quickly. I'm fine. Marisol looked at her for 1 second longer than usual. She was the kind of woman who noticed things, even when people tried to hide them. You looked like you saw a ghost. Evelyn gave a small laugh. It came out wrong. No, just tired. Marisol nodded, but not like she believed her. Well, don't disappear on me tonight. This wedding is huge. Owner's event. Important guests. Everything needs to be perfect. Owner's event. The words hit Evelyn in the chest. She had heard the rumors during her first week back at the hotel. Daniel Hayes, the man who now owns several luxury hotels across the country, had bought this old Chicago property 2 years ago and restored it. People said he cared about the staff. People said he remembered names. People said he had started from nothing. Evelyn had smiled politely when they said that. She already knew. She knew the young Daniel who used to work double shifts, serving wedding guests who never looked him in the eye. She knew the Daniel who used to slip leftover bread rolls into a napkin and hand them to her after midnight. She knew the Daniel who once sat with her on the ballroom floor at 2 in the morning, legs stretched out, bow tie hanging loose around his neck, and said, one day, I want to open a place this beautiful, but kinder. Evelyn had laughed then. Kinder. Yeah, he said, a place where people don't feel small just because they don't have money. He had looked so young when he said it, so sure, so full of light, and she had believed him. Now his name was on a wedding sign, with another woman's name beside it. Evelyn, Marisol said again, softer this time. Evelyn looked down and realized she had been standing still too long. Sorry, she whispered. I'll finish the glasses. She pushed the cart into the ballroom. The room looked nothing like it had 10 years ago. Back then, the carpet had been faded, the chandeliers were missing crystals, and the walls smelled faintly of old wood and coffee. Now everything shone. Tall white flowers stood in silver vases. Gold chairs circled round tables covered in cream linen. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling like frozen rain. It was beautiful, painfully beautiful. Evelyn moved quietly from table to table, polishing fingerprints from wine glasses. Her black uniform was simple. Her hair was tied back. Her name tag sat crooked over her heart. No one looked at her for long. That was one thing about cleaning work. You could be in the center of a room and still feel invisible. Usually, Evelyn liked that. Tonight, she needed it. She told herself she would just finish the shift. She would clean the glasses, check the chairs, help reset the entry table, and leave before the ceremony began. Daniel would never know she had been there. That was better for him, for her, for everyone. A laugh came from the ballroom entrance. Evelyn froze. She knew that laugh. Not exactly the same. Deeper now. Lower, more controlled, but still his. Slowly, and she turned. Daniel Hayes walked in beside 2 men in dark suits. He was older, of course, almost 10 years older. His hair was neater now, his suit expensive, his posture calm in a way that belonged to men who no longer had to ask permission to enter rooms. But Evelyn saw the old Daniel beneath it, the tired eyes, the slight crease between his brows when he listened, The way his hand brushed the back of a chair, almost like he was checking if it was steady for someone else. Her throat tightened. One of the men beside him said something, and Daniel smiled. Not fully, just enough. Evelyn turned away fast and lowered her head. Please don't look here. Please. She picked up a glass and began polishing it, though it was already clean. Daniel's voice drifted closer. Make sure the staff eats before the reception starts, he said. Not after midnight? Before? Yes, Mr. Hayes, one of the men replied. And no one stays past their scheduled shift unless they choose to. I don't want people trapped here because of my wedding. Evelyn's hand stopped. There he was, still there. That made it worse. She heard footsteps moving behind her, closer, then pausing. For one terrible second, she thought he had seen her. Excuse me, Daniel said. Evelyn's heart slammed. She turned halfway, keeping her eyes low. Yes, sir. The words tasted strange. Sir? Daniel stood only a few feet away, holding a folded seating card. His face was calm, polite, distracted. He did not recognize her. Of course he did not. Her hair was shorter now, her face thinner. Life had changed her in quiet, cruel ways. Do you know where table 12 is, he asked. Evelyn looked toward the far side of the room. Near the west windows, she said. Beside the second flower arch. Daniel nodded. Thank you. That was all. Thank you. He turned and walked away. Evelyn stood there, still holding the glass. Her chest hurt in a way that felt almost physical. He had once known the sound of her footsteps. Now he did not know her face. She swallowed hard and placed the glass down before she dropped it. Near the side doors, a woman in a silk bridal robe entered with two bridesmaids behind her. Victoria Langford, beautiful, calm, perfect in the way expensive things look perfect from a distance. She was smiling at someone on her phone. Numb, Victoria said softly, but her voice carried in the empty room. He has no idea. Evelyn did not mean to listen. She really did not. But then Victoria stepped behind the tall flower arch, half hidden from the others, and lowered her voice. After tonight, Daniel signs the merger papers. That's all that matters. Evelyn's fingers went cold. Victoria laughed quietly. Love, please. Don't start that again. Evelyn stopped breathing. The glass in her hand trembled. And for the first time that night, she understood something terrible. This wedding was not just going to break her heart. It might destroy Daniel. Too. Evelyn barely slept that night. Not that she really tried. She lay on the narrow couch beside her mother's bedroom, with her eyes open, staring at the cracked ceiling while the city hummed softly outside the apartment windows. Every few minutes, she heard coughing from the other room, then silence, then another cough. Her mother had finally fallen asleep around 3 in the morning. Evelyn never did, because every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel standing in the ballroom, older, sharper, but still him. And then she heard Victoria's voice again. He has no idea. Evelyn turned onto her side and pulled the blanket tighter around herself. No, this was dangerous. Not physically dangerous, maybe, but emotionally, the kind of thing that dragged people backward into old versions of themselves. She had spent years trying to survive what happened between them, years convincing herself she made the right choice by leaving, and now suddenly he was back. Not really back, just close enough to hurt again. Her phone buzzed softly at 5:12. A message from Marisol. Need you early. Bride's family added breakfast setup. Ballroom staff meeting at 7. Evelyn closed her eyes for a second, then sat up slowly. Her body already felt exhausted. Outside the sky over Chicago was still dark blue. Cold rain tapped gently against the windows. For a moment, she remembered another rainy morning years ago. Daniel sitting beside her at a bus stop with wet hair and tired eyes, holding two cheap coffees between his hands. You know what rich people never appreciate, he had asked. What heat? She laughed softly. That's your deep life philosophy, I'm serious, he said. People who grow up cold never forget warmth. Then he had handed her the warmer coffee without asking which one she wanted. Small things. That was the problem. The small memories survived longer than the dramatic ones. Evelyn dressed quietly in her black work uniform and tied her hair back in front of the bathroom mirror. She looked older than 32. Not old, just tired in permanent places. There were faint shadows beneath her eyes now, tiny lines near her mouth that had not existed years ago. Life had a way of writing itself onto people. Before leaving, she stepped into her mother's room. The old woman was asleep beneath two blankets, oxygen tubing resting under her nose. Evelyn adjusted the blanket gently. I'll bring your medicine after work, she whispered. Her mother stirred slightly but did not wake. The hotel was already alive when Evelyn arrived. Kitchen staff rushed through hallways carrying trays of fruit and pastries. Florists adjusted centerpieces. Security guards checked guest lists near the elevators. Everyone moved quickly. Wedding energy, controlled chaos. Marisol spotted Evelyn immediately. You look terrible, she said. Evelyn blinked. Good morning to you, too. I mean it. Marisol lowered her clipboard. Are you sick? No. You sure? Evelyn nodded. Marisol studied her face carefully, then sighed. Fine. Just don't faint near the ice sculptures. We can't afford that today. That earned a tiny smile from Evelyn. Marisol pointed toward the ballroom. Bride's breakfast set up first, then final polish before rehearsal. Evelyn grabbed fresh linens and headed inside. The ballroom looked softer in the morning light. Pale sunlight filtered through the tall windows, touching the white flowers and gold decorations. For 1 second, Evelyn imagined what it would have felt like to stand here as a bride. Not rich, not glamorous, just loved. She quickly pushed the thought away. A group of bridesmaids entered, laughing loudly. One of them carried garment bags, while another filmed everything on her phone. Victoria's freaking out upstairs, one woman said. She's not nervous. Another replied, she's obsessed with control. The women laughed. Evelyn kept her eyes down while replacing folded napkins. Then she heard heels approaching behind her. Sharp, confident, slow. Victoria, even without looking. Evelyn knew it. Excuse me, Victoria said. Evelyn turned politely. Up close, the bride was stunning. Perfect makeup. Smooth blonde hair pinned carefully behind one ear. Diamond earrings that probably cost more than Evelyn's yearly salary. But there was something cold in her eyes. Not cruel exactly, just calculated. Victoria glanced at the half-finished table arrangement. These roses are wrong. Evelyn looked confused. Wrong. They're ivory. Yes. I requested white. Evelyn checked the floral order card beside the centerpiece. It says ivory roses here. Victoria's smile tightened slightly. Well, then someone made a mistake. One of the bridesmaids quickly stepped forward. It's okay. Victoria, nobody will notice. Victoria looked at the flowers again, then at Evelyn. They notice more than you think. Her tone was calm, too calm. Evelyn apologized quietly and reached for the arrangement, but before she could lift it, another voice entered the room. They look beautiful. Everything inside Evelyn froze again. Daniel! He walked toward them, carrying a tablet and a coffee cup. Victoria's entire face changed when she saw him. Warmer, softer, practiced. She touched his arm lightly. Morning. Daniel kissed her cheek automatically. Not cold, but not deeply affectionate either. The kind of kiss people gave when cameras were around. You're already working, Victoria asked. Couple issues upstairs. Daniel looked toward the flowers. What's wrong? Victoria smiled gently. Nothing important. I just thought the roses were supposed to be white. Daniel glanced at the arrangement. They're fine. Victoria's smile paused for half a second. Tiny, almost invisible. But Evelyn noticed. Daniel turned slightly toward Evelyn without really looking at her face. Sorry if we're making things difficult. Evelyn swallowed. No, sir. Again that word. Sir. Daniel thanked her politely and started walking away, then stopped. Something about him changed. Not fully, just enough to make Evelyn's pulse quicken. He turned back slowly. His eyes rested on her for 1 second longer this time. Evelyn lowered her head immediately. Please don't recognize me. Please. But Daniel only frowned slightly, like he was trying to remember a song he had not heard in years. Then Victoria touched his arm again. You promised breakfast with my father before the rehearsal? Daniel blinked and the moment disappeared. Right, he said quietly. They walked away together. Evelyn released a breath she did not realize she had been holding. But across the ballroom, one of the bridesmaids lingered behind. A brunette woman, maybe around 30. She watched Victoria and Daniel leave, then looked back at Evelyn. There was something strange in her expression. Not judgment, not curiosity, recognition. The woman approached slowly. You know him, she said quietly. Evelyn's stomach tightened. I'm sorry. The bridesmaid lowered her voice. The groom. Evelyn forced herself to stay calm. No. The woman tilted her head slightly. You looked at him like someone attending a funeral. For a second, Evelyn said nothing. Then she picked up the flower arrangement carefully. I should get back to work. The woman watched her walk away, and softly, almost to herself, she murmured, oh boy. By noon, the hotel no longer felt like a workplace. It felt like a machine. Everything moved fast. Staff rushed through hallways with garment racks and champagne crates. Guests began arriving from out of town. Luxury cars lined up outside beneath gray skies while valets jogged through the cold rain. And somewhere inside all that noise, Evelyn kept trying not to think about Daniel. She failed constantly. Table 7 needs reset, more glasses near the stage. Where's ballroom cleaning? Voices echoed around her all afternoon. Evelyn moved automatically from task to task, but her thoughts stayed tangled somewhere 10 years in the past. She remembered Daniel dancing with her once in this exact ballroom after a wedding ended. Not real dancing. Just swaying slowly while the cleaning crew vacuumed around them. There had been no music left, only the humming of machines and the sound of rain against the windows. You know, Daniel had whispered, smiling against her forehead. Technically, this counts as trespassing. Evelyn laughed. You work here. Exactly. That's why I know the rules. Then he spun her once across the empty floor anyway. Back then, he had nothing. Neither did she. But somehow, those nights felt rich. Now everything here looked expensive. And empty. Evelyn. She looked up quickly. It was the brunette bridesmaid from earlier. The woman held 2 coffee cups and approached carefully, like someone walking toward a nervous animal. I'm not trying to bother you, she said softly. I just thought you might need caffeine. Evelyn hesitated. You don't have to do that. I know. The woman handed her 1 cup anyway. Hazelnut. The machine downstairs is terrible. By the way, despite herself, Evelyn gave a small smile. Thank you. The woman leaned lightly against a nearby table. I'm Rachel. Evelyn. I know. That made Evelyn tense again. Rachel noticed immediately. Relax, she said gently. Victoria talks about everyone. I saw your name tag. Evelyn nodded slowly. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Rachel glanced toward the ballroom entrance to make sure no one was nearby. You really know Daniel, don't you? Evelyn stared down at the coffee cup. It was a long time ago. Rachel exhaled quietly, so I wasn't imagining it. Evelyn looked at her carefully now. There was no cruelty in Rachel's face, just concern, the kind that made honesty dangerous. Rachel lowered her voice further. I shouldn't say this because technically Victoria is my friend. But Rachel gave a humorless little laugh. But I don't think she's capable of loving anybody except herself. Evelyn immediately looked around. Keep your voice down, see, Rachel said softly. That reaction right there. You still care about him. Evelyn swallowed hard. No, I just don't want problems. But even she heard how weak that sounded. Rachel studied her for a second, then quietly asked, did he hurt you? The question caught Evelyn off guard, because the truthful answer was complicated. No, she whispered eventually, and that was somehow the saddest part. Daniel had not betrayed her, had not cheated, had not lied. He had simply loved her at the wrong moment in her life. Rachel looked toward the ballroom windows. You know, he almost canceled this wedding once. Evelyn's eyes lifted immediately. What had happened about 3 months ago? Rachel shrugged lightly. Victoria was furious. They disappeared into his office for almost an hour. What happened? Rachel hesitated. I don't know exactly, but after that, things changed. How? Rachel searched for the right words. He stopped looking happy. The sentence landed quietly between them. Evelyn looked away. That should not matter anymore. It absolutely should not. And yet, Rachel continued carefully. I met Daniel 2 years ago. He's polite, generous, weirdly kind to hotel staff. She gave Evelyn a meaningful look, like unusually kind. Evelyn almost smiled despite herself. That sounded exactly like him. Rachel took a sip of coffee. But Victoria's father owns Langford Capital, huge investment group. They've been pushing this merger with Daniel's hotels for months. Evelyn's stomach tightened again. So the marriage matters financially? Rachel nodded. A lot, and Daniel agreed to it. That's the weird thing. Rachel frowned slightly. Sometimes it feels like he's trying to convince himself. Before Evelyn could answer, a sharp voice cut through the ballroom. Rachel! Victoria stood near the entrance in a fitted white rehearsal dress, irritation written all over her face. There you are. My mother's looking for you, Rachel muttered under her breath. Speak of the devil. Victoria approached them slowly. Her eyes landed first on Rachel, then on Evelyn, then on the coffee cup in Evelyn's hand. Something cold flickered behind her smile. I didn't realize the staff and bridal party were socializing now. Rachel straightened immediately. We were just talking. Victoria's gaze stayed on Evelyn, long enough to make the air uncomfortable. Evelyn lowered her eyes again. I'm sorry if we're behind on setup. You're not behind, Victoria replied smoothly, but there's still plenty to finish. The meaning was clear. Get back to work. Rachel opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else, then stopped. See you later, she told Evelyn quietly before walking away. Victoria watched her leave, then stepped closer to Evelyn. Up close, her perfume smelled expensive and sharp. You've worked here long, no? How long? A few months? Victoria nodded slowly, then asked very casually, and have you met my fiancé? Before Evelyn's heartbeat stumbled. Just once. Hard. No, she lied. Victoria held her gaze. Evelyn could feel the woman studying her face carefully now, like she was solving a puzzle. Finally, Victoria smiled again, but this time it did not reach her eyes. That's good, and she walked away. Evelyn stood perfectly still until Victoria disappeared around the corner. Only then did she realize her hands were shaking. That woman knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough to be dangerous. A few hours later, rehearsal dinner preparations began upstairs. The ballroom emptied briefly. Evelyn was replacing champagne bottles behind the service bar when she heard footsteps again. Heavy, familiar. Daniel. She immediately stepped back behind the shelves, hoping he would pass. Instead, he stopped directly outside the bar area. She could hear him speaking to someone quietly, an older man. Victoria's father. After tomorrow. We move quickly, the older man said. The board expects signatures within the week. Daniel sounded tired. I know. You seem distracted lately. Silence. Then Daniel answered carefully. I'm just trying to make sure I'm doing the right thing. Victoria's father laughed softly. The right thing rarely builds empires. Footsteps moved again, then stopped. Daniel, the older man added quietly. Love fades. Stability matters longer. There was a long pause after that. Too long. And then Daniel said something that made Evelyn's chest ache instantly. I used to believe that wasn't true. The footsteps faded down the hallway. Evelyn stayed frozen behind the shelves because she knew exactly who he had been talking about. And for the first time since seeing his name on that wedding sign, she began wondering something she had tried very hard not to wonder. What if Daniel never really stopped loving her either? The rehearsal dinner started at 7. By 8:30, the ballroom upstairs was full of expensive laughter and clinking wine glasses. Evelyn could hear it through the service hallway while she folded linens beside the kitchen entrance. Every now and then, servers pushed through the swinging doors carrying trays of champagne or tiny desserts balanced perfectly in neat rows. The smell of roasted garlic and butter drifted through the hallway. Somewhere deeper inside the ballroom, a band played soft jazz, and Evelyn hated herself a little for listening for Daniel's voice. Careful. A server brushed past her quickly. Evelyn stepped aside with an apology and accidentally bumped her elbow against a stack of silverware trays. Forks crashed loudly onto the floor. Heads turned instantly. Heat rushed into her face. I'm so sorry, she whispered, crouching down immediately. It's okay, one server said kindly, but embarrassment already burned through her chest. She hated making scenes, especially here, especially tonight, as she gathered the silverware. Another pair of hands suddenly reached down to help her. Large hands, familiar hands. Evelyn froze. Slowly, she looked up. Daniel. For one suspended second, neither of them moved. He held several forks loosely in one hand while staring at her face more directly than before. Close now. Too close. Evelyn felt exposed under his eyes, not because he recognized her yet, but because some part of him was trying to. You dropped these, he said quietly. His voice sounded different this close. Older. Sadder. Evelyn lowered her gaze immediately. Thank you. Daniel remained crouched beside her. Most owners would not have. Most wealthy men in expensive suits would have walked away and let staff handle it. But Daniel stayed there on the floor, helping her pick up forks one by one. Exactly like the boy he used to be. That hurt more than anything. You okay? He asked softly. Evelyn nodded too fast. Yes. You sure? Yep, sir. Again. Sir. Daniel's expression shifted slightly at the word, like it bothered him. You don't have to call me that. Evelyn swallowed. Old memories pressed painfully against her ribs. She remembered him once grinning while balancing dirty plates after a wedding shift. One day, he had joked, people are going to call me sir, and I'll know I became unbearable. Back then, she had laughed so hard she almost spilled coffee on him. Now neither of them laughed. A kitchen worker called Evelyn's name from inside. She stood immediately. I should go. Daniel rose more slowly. For 1 second, he kept looking at her. Then quietly asked, have we met before everything inside her stopped? There it was. The question she had feared since yesterday. Evelyn forced herself to breathe normally. I don't think so. Daniel frowned lightly. That's strange. She could not speak, because his eyes were searching her face now. Not casually. Carefully, like someone reaching toward a memory through fog. Before either of them could say another word, Victoria appeared at the hallway entrance. There you are. Her tone was light, but her eyes immediately landed on Evelyn, then Daniel, then the silverware still scattered across the floor. Something sharp flashed across her expression. Daniel straightened. Just helping. Victoria smiled politely. Of course, but the smile vanished the second she looked back at Evelyn. We need to greet the investors from Seattle, she told Daniel. I'll be there in a minute. Victoria did not move. Now. Daniel. The silence stretched awkwardly. Then Daniel gave Evelyn one last uncertain look before leaving with Victoria. As soon as they disappeared down the hallway, Evelyn released a shaky breath. Her knees felt weak. Marisol entered moments later carrying fresh table linens. What happened? Nothing? Marisol raised an eyebrow at the silverware still on the floor. That doesn't look like nothing. Evelyn bent down quickly again. I'm just tired. Marisol watched her quietly, then sighed. Take 10 minutes outside before you pass out. I'm fine. That wasn't a suggestion. 20 minutes later, Evelyn stood alone behind the hotel near the loading dock, with her coat wrapped tightly around herself. Cold wind moved through the alley. Rainwater dripped steadily from metal pipes overhead. She closed her eyes. Big mistake, because immediately she saw Daniel again. Have we met before? The worst part was hearing the confusion in his voice. Not anger, not bitterness, just confusion, like some buried part of him already knew the answer. The back door opened behind her. Evelyn turned quickly. Rachel stepped outside holding 2 cigarettes and a lighter. I don't smoke, Evelyn said immediately. Good. These things are poison. Rachel lit one anyway. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Rachel exhaled smoke into the cold air. So, that was intense. Evelyn looked away. You saw that half the hallway saw that. Wonderful. Rachel leaned against the brick wall. He almost recognized you. I know, you still planning to stay silent? Evelyn crossed her arms tighter. What exactly am I supposed to say? Rachel shrugged lightly. I don't know. Maybe the truth. Evelyn laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. You think truth fixes things? Rachel looked at her carefully. No, but lies usually cost more. That sentence stayed hanging between them. Evelyn stared out toward the wet alley. I left him, she said quietly. Rachel waited. For almost a year, he kept calling, texting, emailing. Evelyn swallowed hard, then eventually he stopped. You had your reasons. That doesn't erase what it did to him. Rachel took another drag from the cigarette. You know what's strange, she said softly. What I've known Victoria for 6 years. She paused. And I've never once seen her look at Daniel the way you looked at him, picking forks off the floor. Evelyn immediately looked away again. That doesn't matter anymore. Maybe not. Rachel crushed the cigarette beneath her heel. But I think it matters to him. Before Evelyn could respond, voices echoed faintly from the partially open loading entrance. Male voices, one of them Daniel's. The women instinctively fell silent. Tomorrow after the ceremony, Victoria's father was saying, and the prenup amendments, Daniel asked. They'll be added to the final signing package. Daniel sounded irritated now. That wasn't our agreement. Relax. It protects both families. Evelyn and Rachel exchanged a quick glance. Then another voice entered. Victoria. Sharp. Controlled. We shouldn't discuss this near staff entrances. Daniel sounded exhausted. Then maybe stop changing legal documents 24 hours before the wedding. Silence. A dangerous kind. Victoria spoke again. Lower this time. You're overreacting. No, Daniel replied quietly. I'm finally reacting the correct amount. Evelyn felt something twist painfully inside her. because that did not sound like a man excited to get married. Footsteps approached the door suddenly. Rachel grabbed Evelyn's sleeve fast and pulled her deeper behind the brick corner. A second later, Daniel stepped outside alone. He loosened his tie slightly and rubbed a hand over his face. Tired. God, he looked tired. For a long moment, he simply stood there in the cold rain mist, breathing slowly. Then he whispered something so quietly Evelyn almost missed it. "I don't think I can do this." Rachel's eyes widened slightly. But Evelyn felt her heart break all over again. Because 10 years ago, Daniel had looked at her with certainty. Now he looked like a man walking towards something he already regretted. And somehow, she might be the only person who truly understood why. The next morning arrived too fast. Wedding day. By 6 a.m., the hotel was already glowing with soft gold lighting and controlled panic. Hairstylists hurried through elevators. Makeup artists carried giant black cases across the lobby. Florists adjusted white orchids near the grand staircase, while photographers tested camera flashes beside the ballroom entrance. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Evelyn stood alone near the service station, folding napkins with mechanical precision. Fold, turn, smooth the fabric, repeat, anything to stop thinking. She had barely spoken since last night. Not because she was angry, because she was scared. Scared that Rachel might be right. Scared that Daniel was unhappy. Scared that if she opened her mouth now, after all these years, she would destroy whatever fragile life he had rebuilt without her. And underneath all of that, there was another fear she hated even more. What if he looked at her with hatred once he finally recognized her Earth to Evelyn? Marisol snapped her fingers lightly in front of her face. "You folded the same napkin 3 times. Evelyn blinked. "Ugh." Marisol crossed her arms. "You're somewhere else today." "I'm working. Physically." "Yes." Evelyn tried to smile. It failed. Marisol lowered her voice. "Did something happen with the owner?" Evelyn nearly dropped the napkin. "What?" "I'm not blind," Marisol said quietly. "The man keeps looking at you like he misplaced a memory." Evelyn looked down immediately. "It's nothing." Marisol clearly did not believe her. But before she could press further, one of the coordinators rushed over frantically. "We need ballroom cleanup now. Bride's suite sent down broken champagne glasses." Marisol groaned. "Of course they did." She pointed toward Evelyn. "Go help upstairs." The bride's private suite occupied the top floor. Everything there smelled expensive. Fresh flowers, perfume, hairspray, champagne. Evelyn entered quietly with cleaning supplies balanced against her hip. Inside, bridesmaids moved around in silk robes while stylists adjusted makeup mirrors near the windows. Victoria stood near the center of the room in a half-finished wedding dress while someone worked on the back zipper. She looked beautiful, cold, flawless, beautiful. Rachel spotted Evelyn first. Her expression changed instantly. Concern, warning, something. Evelyn did not understand it until Victoria turned around slowly. Their eyes met, and Evelyn realized Victoria knew. Maybe not the full story, but enough. "You," Victoria said calmly. The room quieted slightly. Evelyn kept her voice professional. "I'm here to clean the broken glass." "Ma'am?" Victoria smiled faintly. "Right." One bridesmaid quickly pointed toward the corner near the minibar. There, Evelyn crouched carefully and began gathering shattered crystal pieces into a towel. Behind her, the room buzzed softly with wedding chatter. Until Victoria suddenly said, "Could everyone give us a minute?" The conversation stopped. Rachel looked uncomfortable immediately. "Victoria, please." Her tone stayed pleasant, but final. One by one, the women slowly exited the suite. Rachel lingered longest. Before leaving, She gave Evelyn a worried look. Then the door closed. Silence. Evelyn kept picking up glass. Victoria walked closer slowly. The soft fabric of her dress whispered against the carpet. "You're good at hiding emotion," she said. Evelyn did not answer, but not good enough. Still silence. Victoria stopped directly beside her. "You know, Daniel," not a question this time. Evelyn finally spoke quietly. "A long time ago." "How long?" "Almost 10 years. Victoria absorbed that, then laughed softly under her breath. "That explains it." Evelyn looked up carefully. "Explains what?" "The way he looks at you." Evelyn's chest tightened. Victoria moved toward the large mirror near the window. "You know something funny," she said while adjusting one diamond earring. "Daniel almost never notices women staring at him." Evelyn remained silent. But yesterday, Victoria smiled faintly at her own reflection. "He noticed you immediately." "That's not true." "Oh, it is." Victoria turned now, and for the first time, the mask slipped slightly. Underneath the elegance was irritation, possessiveness, fear. "You disappeared once already," Victoria said quietly. "So let's not make things complicated now." Evelyn stood slowly. "I didn't come here to cause problems." "No," Victoria stepped closer. "Then why does he suddenly look like a man waking up from a dream every time you enter a room?" Evelyn swallowed hard. Because she did not have an answer. Victoria folded her arms lightly. "I know about you. By the way," the words hit instantly. Evelyn's pulse jumped. "Not everything," Victoria continued, "but enough. What do you think you know that he loved you?" Victoria tilted her head slightly. "And you abandoned him." The sentence landed like a slap. Evelyn looked away immediately, because part of it was true. Victoria noticed. "Interesting," she murmured softly. For a second, neither woman spoke. Then Victoria's voice changed again. "Cooler now. Businesslike. You should leave after your shift." "I plan to." "No." Victoria stepped closer. "I mean, leave the hotel entirely." Evelyn stared at her. "You're serious?" "Yes." Why Victoria's smile faded completely. "Because I'm not stupid." The honesty of that answer unsettled Evelyn more than anger would have. Victoria walked slowly toward the window overlooking downtown Chicago. "You know what men like Daniel are?" she asked quietly. Evelyn said nothing. "They build entire lives around loyalty." Victoria glanced back at her. "And once they attach that loyalty to someone, it never fully disappears." A strange sadness moved briefly across her face. Real sadness. Gone almost immediately. Then she added, "And I did not spend 3 years building this future, just to lose it to a ballroom cleaner with sad eyes." The cruelty of the sentence stung, but Evelyn also heard something underneath it. Desperation. That surprised her. "You don't love him," Evelyn said quietly. Victoria's jaw tightened slightly. "You think love is enough for marriage?" "No." Victoria laughed once. Sharp. "Good. Then at least you grew up." Before Evelyn could respond, the suite door suddenly opened. Daniel entered halfway while looking down at his phone. "Victoria, your father's asking." He stopped instantly. His eyes landed on Evelyn. And this time, everything changed. Not fully, not all at once, but something inside his face shifted hard. Recognition flickered there. Fast, violent, like lightning behind glass. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her body. Daniel stared at her without moving, then slowly whispered, "Evelyn." Nobody spoke. Not immediately. The room felt frozen around that single word. Evelyn. Daniel stood motionless near the doorway, phone still hanging loosely in his hand. Like he had forgotten why he came upstairs at all. Victoria looked between them slowly. And suddenly the silence became dangerous. Evelyn's throat tightened painfully. 10 years. 10 years of absence, guilt, memories, regret, and somehow the moment she imagined most happened in complete stillness. No dramatic music, no shouting, just Daniel staring at her like the ground beneath him had shifted. You? His voice cracked slightly, not loudly, just enough for her to hear it. Evelyn lowered her eyes immediately. I should finish cleaning. She tried to move past him. Daniel stepped aside automatically, but then caught her wrist gently. Not aggressive, not forceful, just instinct. The second his skin touched hers, both of them froze again. Because they remembered. Too much. Too fast. Late nights in empty train stations. Cold fingers intertwined under restaurant tables. Holding each other half asleep after double shifts. Years collapsed inside one touch. Daniel released her wrist almost immediately, like he realized it too. Evelyn, he said again, quieter now. What are you doing here? She could not answer honestly, not with Victoria standing there, not with all this history suddenly bleeding into the room. I work here. Daniel stared at her black uniform, the name tag, the cleaning supplies still sitting beside the broken crystal. Something in his expression twisted painfully. You work here? Evelyn nodded once. Victoria crossed her arms slowly. Well, she said lightly, this explains a lot. Neither of them looked at her. That made Victoria's face harden for the first time. Daniel stepped closer to Evelyn. You disappeared. The words were not angry. That was worse. They sounded wounded, deeply wounded. Evelyn forced herself to breathe. I know. For a year I tried to find you. Her chest tightened instantly. I know. You changed your number. Yes. You left without even. Daniel stopped himself suddenly and looked away, like he hated how emotional he sounded. Evelyn could barely stand upright anymore, because she remembered every missed call, every voicemail she listened to while crying alone in another state. Every message she never answered because she believed ruining his future would hurt less than dragging him into hers. She had been wrong. So terribly wrong. Victoria finally stepped forward. I think this conversation should happen another time. Daniel ignored her completely. His eyes never left Evelyn. Why one word? Simple, broken. Evelyn opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because there was no short answer big enough for the damage she caused. My brother had an accident, she whispered eventually. Daniel blinked. What, he almost died? The room stayed silent. Evelyn stared down at the carpet. My mother lost the apartment. The hospital bills kept growing. I got offered work in Milwaukee, but I had to leave immediately. Daniel looked stunned. Why didn't you tell me? Tears burned behind Evelyn's eyes instantly. Because you were saving for a ring. Daniel's expression changed completely. She continued before she lost courage. You were talking about apartments, about our future. Her voice shook. And I looked at you and realized if I stayed, your life would drown beside mine. That wasn't your decision to make. I know that now. The honesty in her voice hit hard. Daniel looked like someone trying to process years of pain in real time. You thought I would leave because things got hard. No? Evelyn shook her head quickly. That was the problem. I knew you wouldn't. Silence. Heavy silence. Daniel rubbed one hand slowly across his face. For a moment, he looked less like a billionaire hotel owner and more like the exhausted 23-year-old man she once loved. You broke me, he said quietly. The words nearly knocked the breath out of her. Victoria shifted uncomfortably nearby. Daniel laughed once under his breath. No humor in it. For months I thought maybe you were dead. He swallowed hard. Then eventually I convinced myself you just stopped loving me. Evelyn's eyes filled instantly. I never stopped. That slipped out before she could stop it. The entire room went still again. Daniel stared at her. and something raw passed across his face. Hope. Terrible, dangerous hope. Victoria saw it too, and suddenly her calm disappeared. Daniel. He did not look away from Evelyn. Victoria stepped closer. Daniel. Finally, he turned slightly. Victoria folded her arms tightly now. We have guests arriving in less than an hour. Daniel looked at her like he had forgotten she was there. That hurt her. Evelyn saw it clearly. And despite everything, guilt stabbed through her chest again. Because this was becoming ugly. Real people were getting hurt now. Victoria's eyes moved back toward Evelyn. Cold again. You should go, Daniel answered before Evelyn could. No. Victoria stared at him. No, she repeated carefully. Daniel looked back at Evelyn slowly. I need to talk to her. About what? Victoria asked sharply. Ancient history. Daniel finally lost patience. It's not ancient to me. The words hit the room like shattered glass. Victoria went pale, and suddenly Evelyn understood something important. Victoria had always known Daniel cared about her. But until this exact moment, she had not realized how much. The suite door opened abruptly again before anyone could speak further. Rachel stepped inside holding a garment bag, then instantly froze at the tension in the room. Wow, she whispered. Nobody answered. Rachel looked from Daniel to Evelyn to Victoria, then quietly back toward the door. I can come back. Stay. Victoria snapped immediately. Rachel stopped. Daniel suddenly looked exhausted, completely exhausted. He loosened his tie slightly and turned toward the window. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then Daniel asked something softly, not to Victoria, to Evelyn. Are you happy? The question broke her heart, because she knew what he was really asking. Did leaving save you? Was losing us worth it? Evelyn looked at him carefully, really looked at him, and saw the same thing she felt inside herself. Years of surviving instead of living. I don't know, she admitted quietly. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Rachel looked like she wanted to disappear. Victoria looked like she wanted to scream. And somewhere downstairs, the wedding guests were beginning to arrive. The ceremony was supposed to begin at 4. At 3:30, the ballroom already shimmered with candlelight and quiet conversation. Guests filled the gold-trimmed chairs in soft waves of designer suits and expensive dresses. Waiters moved carefully between tables carrying champagne flutes while a string quartet played near the stage. Everything looked flawless. But backstage, everything was falling apart. Evelyn stood alone inside a narrow service hallway behind the ballroom kitchen, gripping the edge of a metal counter so tightly her fingers hurt. Her breathing still felt uneven after the confrontation upstairs. She should have left hours ago, before Daniel recognized her, before old wounds reopened, before she saw that look in his eyes again, that terrible look, the one that said some part of him had never moved on. Footsteps approached quickly. Rachel appeared first. Then Daniel behind her, still wearing the black tuxedo, still looking like a man standing too close to the edge of something. Rachel glanced nervously between them. I'll stand near the hallway entrance, she muttered, in case Victoria comes looking. Then she disappeared around the corner. Now it was just them. Again, for several seconds, neither Evelyn nor Daniel spoke. The distant sound of the quartet drifted faintly through the walls. Daniel finally broke the silence. I kept hearing your voice in my head for years. Evelyn's eyes immediately burned again. Daniel, no. Let me finish. His voice was calm, too calm, like someone holding himself together carefully. I'd be in meetings, or opening hotels, or shaking hands with investors. He laughed quietly without humor. And suddenly I'd remember the way you used to say my name when you were tired. Evelyn lowered her gaze, because she remembered too much too. I hated you sometimes, Daniel admitted softly. That hurt. But she nodded anyway. You should have. But the worst part, he looked at her carefully. I never fully believed you stopped loving me. Silence. Evelyn felt tears slipping slowly down her face now. She wiped them quickly. I didn't come back to ruin your wedding. I know. I wasn't planning to tell you anything. I know. Daniel stepped closer slowly, not touching her, just closer. You should have trusted me. Evelyn nodded weakly. I know that too. The honesty between them felt brutal now. No games left, no pride, just regret stripped completely bare. Daniel looked exhausted. You know what's funny, he murmured. For years I kept thinking if I ever saw you again, I'd scream at you. Evelyn tried to smile through tears. And now, I just feel tired. That nearly broke her completely, because she understood exactly what he meant. Tired from carrying pain too long. Tired from pretending certain losses no longer mattered. Daniel rubbed both hands over his face slowly, then finally asked the question waiting between them since morning. Did you ever think about coming back? Evelyn answered honestly. Every day. Daniel looked away immediately after hearing that, like it physically hurt. Then why didn't you? My mother got sick. Evelyn swallowed hard. Then life just kept happening. Bill, hospitals, work. She laughed softly through tears. After enough time passed, I didn't know how to return without destroying everything. Daniel looked at her again. You didn't destroy everything, but his voice cracked slightly when he said it, and both of them knew that was not fully true. Suddenly, voices echoed from farther down the hallway. Victoria. Angry. Where is he? Rachel answered carefully. I think he's outside taking a breather. He disappears 30 minutes before the ceremony. Footsteps moved closer fast. Daniel exhaled slowly. This is a mess. Yes. He looked at her for one long second, then asked quietly, Tell me the truth. Evelyn's heartbeat stumbled. About what yesterday? Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. You overheard something, didn't you? For a moment she froze completely, because now they had reached the real cliff edge, the secret, the reason she had not slept, the thing that could destroy this wedding before it even began. Evelyn looked toward the hallway entrance nervously. Daniel, what is it? She hesitated. One more chance to stay silent. One more chance to walk away and let life continue. Simple, clean, safe. But then she remembered Victoria laughing softly on the phone. He has no idea. And she remembered younger Daniel standing outside in winter snow holding medicine for her sick mother because he could not afford anything better. Good people did not deserve betrayal simply because they were kind. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, then whispered, I heard Victoria talking to another man. Daniel went completely still. What man? I don't know his name. What did she say? Evelyn forced herself to continue. She said after the wedding you'd sign merger papers. Her throat tightened, and that she didn't love you. The silence afterward felt enormous. Daniel stared at her without blinking. She said that, yes. He looked away slowly, not shocked. That frightened Evelyn immediately. You already suspected, she realized quietly. Daniel gave a bitter little laugh. I suspected something. Before either of them could continue, the hallway entrance exploded with movement. Victoria. Her face went pale instantly when she saw them together. Rachel stood behind her looking deeply uncomfortable. For a second, nobody moved. Then Victoria spoke very softly. Everyone is waiting. Daniel did not answer. Victoria's eyes shifted toward Evelyn. She told you, didn't she? That confirmed everything instantly. Daniel looked at Victoria carefully now. Not angry, worse, disappointed. Victoria folded her arms tightly. It's not what you think. Then explain it. Her composure finally cracked. You think your business is clean? She snapped quietly. You think your investors care about love? Daniel stared at her. Victoria stepped closer. This merger protects both companies. And the affair, Evelyn asked before she could stop herself. Victoria whipped toward her immediately. Rachel closed her eyes briefly like she knew things had officially become catastrophic. Daniel looked confused. What affair? Too late. The words were already hanging there. Victoria laughed once. Cold. Oh, wonderful. Daniel's face slowly changed. Not explosive anger. Not shouting. Just devastation arriving piece by piece. Victoria looked suddenly tired too. You want honesty, she said sharply. Fine. I never planned to spend my whole life pretending with someone still emotionally haunted by a ballroom cleaner. Evelyn flinched. Daniel's expression hardened instantly. Don't talk about her like that. Victoria stared at him, and in that exact moment, she understood she had already lost. Not today. Not because of the affair. Years ago, long before Evelyn walked back into this hotel. The ballroom music outside swelled softly as guests waited for the ceremony to begin, and Daniel Hayes stood in the hallway between two women, finally forced to decide what kind of life he was willing to live. For a long moment, nobody moved. The hallway felt impossibly small now. Too much history, too much damage, too many truths finally dragged into the light. Victoria looked at Daniel with tears burning angrily in her eyes. You know what the worst part is, she asked quietly. I actually tried. Daniel stayed silent. I knew you were emotionally unavailable from the beginning. She laughed bitterly. I just thought eventually I'd matter more than a ghost. Evelyn looked down immediately, because suddenly this did not feel simple anymore. Victoria was manipulative. Yes, she had lied. Yes, but pain was still pain. Rachel stood near the wall, completely silent, watching everything unravel. Daniel finally spoke. You should have told me the truth. Victoria folded her arms tighter. And you should have stopped loving someone who abandoned you. That landed hard. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Daniel looked exhausted again. No, he said quietly. She left because she was scared. Victoria laughed sharply. That makes it better. No, Daniel shook his head slowly. But it makes it human. The hallway fell silent again. Then Daniel looked directly at Victoria. We can't do this. There it was. The end. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just final. Victoria stared at him for several seconds, then gave one small nod, almost relieved. You should tell them yourself, she whispered, and then she walked away. No screaming, no broken glasses, just the soft sound of heels disappearing down the hallway. Rachel exhaled slowly under her breath. Jesus. Daniel rubbed both hands across his face again. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then he looked toward the ballroom doors where hundreds of guests still waited. I have to go out there. Evelyn's chest tightened. You don't owe anyone a performance, Rachel said carefully. Daniel gave a tired smile. Unfortunately, I think I do. He started toward the ballroom entrance, then stopped, turned back, looked at Evelyn. That look held 10 years inside it. Love, anger, loss, memory, and something else too. Something fragile. Possibility. I meant what I asked earlier, he said softly, about being happy. Evelyn swallowed hard. Daniel continued quietly. I built everything I said I would build. He looked toward the ballroom. Hotel, money, stability, then back at her. But somehow I still kept measuring my life against a girl sitting on a ballroom floor, eating cold noodles with me at 2 a.m. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes again, instantly. Daniel smiled faintly. Sad. Real. You were the only thing that ever felt like home. And then he walked away. 20 minutes later, Daniel Hayes stood alone at the front of the ballroom beneath crystal chandeliers, while hundreds of guests watched in confusion. The quartet had stopped playing. The silence inside the room felt enormous. Evelyn watched everything from the partially open service doors hidden behind guests and flower arrangements. Daniel held no microphone. He did not need one. The room was quiet enough to hear his breathing. "I owe everyone here honesty," he said calmly. People shifted uneasily in their seats. Daniel glanced briefly toward Victoria's empty chair, then continued, "There will not be a wedding today." Gasps moved instantly across the ballroom. Some angry, some shocked, some fascinated. Daniel remained calm through all of it. "This decision belongs to both Victoria and me." His voice stayed respectful. "And despite the circumstances, I ask everyone here to give her kindness." That surprised Evelyn. Even now, he protected her dignity. Daniel looked across the crowd slowly, then added one final thing. "Sometimes you can spend years building the wrong future because you're afraid to admit your heart never truly left the past." Silence. Then chaos. Questions exploded everywhere at once, but Daniel stepped away before anyone could stop him. Hours later, the ballroom was nearly empty. The flowers remained. The candles still glowed softly. But now the room looked strange, like a stage after actors had gone home. Evelyn stood alone near the windows collecting abandoned champagne glasses. One final task before leaving forever. She heard footsteps behind her. This time she did not panic. Daniel stopped beside her quietly. No tuxedo jacket anymore. Tie loosened, exhaustion written all over his face. For a while, they simply stood there looking out over the rainy Chicago streets below. Then Daniel spoke softly. "You know what bothered me most after you disappeared?" Evelyn looked at him carefully. "I kept thinking maybe I imagined us." He laughed faintly. "Like maybe I loved you more than you loved me?" Evelyn shook her head immediately. "No." Daniel looked at her, and for the first time in 10 years, there was no wall between them anymore. Just truth. Messy truth. Evelyn wiped at her eyes. "I was ashamed," she admitted quietly. "Everything in my life was collapsing, and I didn't know how to let you watch it happen." Daniel's expression softened painfully. "You should have let me stay." "I know." Rain tapped gently against the ballroom windows. Downstairs, hotel staff quietly cleaned the remains of a wedding that never happened. Life continuing, always continuing. Daniel looked at her for a long moment, then carefully asked, "What happens now?" Evelyn laughed softly through tears. "I honestly don't know." And maybe that was the first truly honest beginning either of them had ever had. Not a perfect ending. Not some magical reunion where 10 years disappeared overnight. Too much had happened for that. Too much hurt. Too much lost time. But when Daniel slowly reached for her hand this time, Evelyn did not let go. Outside, rain fell softly over Chicago. And inside the old ballroom where they once sat together on the floor, with nothing but cheap noodles and impossible dreams, two people finally stopped running from the truth.